The pronoun I, why, is it always a capital? On Learn With Me, Mrs. Sullivan. In this video, we will learn about pronouns and why the pronoun I is always written with a capital letter.
Is this a comma here? Followed by a I capital letter? Well, if the argument is about, well, there's a small p, so it's not the prince in charge. Hey, there's a big G, but hey, God, it got to be a mistake in the Bible. Well, it's all messed up then, because you've got Voice of Jane saying there's got to be an error because it's big G followed by a God. So how is it it's big G if it's a God? Then you've got MacGyver saying it's a little p here, so it cannot be the prince in charge. But then after that, you've got I am a God. I sit in the seat of God, but there's the comma. And there's the capital letter I. But there's the comma. And there's the capital letter I.
I is not just a letter. I is also a word. There are only two one-letter words, I and a, or Sometimes we read it as a or a. Unlike the word a, the word I has a special rule. The word I must always be written with a capital letter.
But there's the comma. And there's the capital letter I.
The word I must always be written with a capital letter.
So if you're looking for, okay, we're going to know if it's capital letter or if it's not capital letter, you're wrong. Because you cannot justify why it's capital letter I followed by a comma. Since you made the argument about P is not capital letter, and Voice of Jane made the argument it's G capital letter, but it shouldn't because it's followed by a God. Everybody cannot discern that it's not about the capital letter. It's about the intention behind the word that needs to be interpreted.
So why is the word I always written with a capital letter? It's because it's a special pronoun.
Let's verify if it's really a comma. It's not a dot, it's a comma. A comma, continuing a sentence. A dot, stopping a sentence, starting a new sentence, if that's the case. Is this a comma or a dot? And then after that, there's the capital letter I. I think it's a comma. Why then it's a I capital letter? Is it another mistake?
So why is I the only pronoun that's always a capital? The pronoun I stands for yourself. It replaces your name. The pronoun I replaces your most important word, your name. And your name is always capitalized. It's a proper noun.
Why then it's a I capital letter? Is it another mistake?
Because we're using the pronoun I instead of our name, I is always capitalized.
It is a comma. And then it's followed with I capital letter. So it's not a new sentence here. It's the continuing of the same sentence. How is it that there's a capital letter then? Voice of Jane was concentrating on this, and he said this is a mistake. Well, what about this? Okay, as said, you're starting to say something, it can have a capital letter. But then after that, comma again, and another capital letter I. You cannot justify this one. You cannot justify this one. It's a continuing sentence.
Why would you say that I can't justify the second use of the word I being in uppercase? And you say that it's because the word I that's being used here is in the middle of a continuing sentence and not at the start of the sentence. And that for some reason the word I is supposed to be in the lowercase. And if it isn't in the lowercase, then it could be seen as an error too.
Okay, as said, you're starting to say something, it can have a capital letter. But then after that, comma again, and another capital letter I. You cannot justify this one. You cannot justify this one.
And I like how you tried to work in the fact that the word that follows directly after the hidden quotation marks in the KJV Bible, that word will always be capitalized. And that's because it's the beginning of somebody's quote. Therefore, it's seen as the beginning of a sentence. So that means that the word would require that it be capitalized. However, Jonathan, in this case, you don't have a leg to stand on when you're telling me that I can't justify why the second I that's being used after the comma here in your example, why it's capitalized too and not a lowercase I. And my justification for that is the fact that the personal pronoun I, it's always going to be capitalized wherever it might be found in the English writings. There's no exception. And it's just one of the rules of writing, Jonathan. I mean, you learn something new every day, eh? And as far as the word a preceding the word God and what that might actually mean, I mean, I'm still studying the other times that it's being used in the Bible and the context in which it's being used, but that video is going to have to wait for another day. Because today's video is just going to be responding to you saying that I can't justify the word I being capitalized after the second comma. But I can. And so I did.
It is a comma, and then it's followed with I capital letter. So it's not a new sentence here. It's the continuing of the same sentence. How is it that there's a capital letter then? Voice of Gene was concentrating on this, and he said this is a mistake. Well, what about this? Okay, as said, you're starting to say something, it can have a capital letter. But then after that, comma again, and another capital letter I. You cannot justify this one. You cannot justify this one. It's a continuing sentence.
The pronoun I is the only pronoun that is always standing in for a proper noun. We use I instead of our own name. Even when we're writing about people, we might not be replacing an actual proper noun in a sentence. Let's look at some examples. So we might say, my teacher. And my teacher isn't a proper noun, and we replace that with she or he. My friends, I could replace that with they. It's not a proper noun either. But here's the really tricky thing. There's only one pronoun that gets capitalized no matter where it is in the sentence. No matter where it is in the sentence. And that's the pronoun I. Because it's the only one that's guaranteed to be standing in for someone. And also, that someone is you, yourself, the most important person. So we always capitalize the pronoun I.
Just one more time. Just one more time. Mike Gaver did the exact same thing that was presented in the video of Eugene. Then he said, I accept the challenge. And then he goes on to do the exact same thing. There was the A missing, but this time it was over, thou art a man. How did I even find this? I was not even watching his video. Led by Spirit. The direction from Jehovah. I am.
The pronoun I is the only pronoun that is always standing in for a proper noun. In fact, your proper noun, yourself. So the pronoun I is always written with a capital. Now, here's a song to remind you to capitalize the word I. I, a little word that stands for me. So every time I write I, a capital it must be.
Kelly Barr is describing this as sitting at the table of fools.
One more time. I, a little word that stands for me. So every time I write I, a capital it must be.
How did I even find this? I was not even watching his video. Led by Spirit. The direction from Jehovah. I am.